ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that news of Emma's impending return spread through Port Charles like a quiet spark that suddenly flared into a blaze of emotion, anticipation, and unease. For many, her homecoming felt like a comforting shift, a piece of history sliding back into place, but for those closest to her, particularly Gio, it meant something deeper, something life-altering. The moment he learned Emma was returning, a weight he didn't realize he had been carrying lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a warm electric joy that rushed through him with an intensity he could barely contain. After everything the town had endured, after the secrets, the disappearances, the betrayals, the lingering shadows cast by danger, the thought of Emma coming home felt like light breaking through a sky that had been dark far too long. But even as his hope grew, so did the eerie sense that Emma's return was more than just a family reunion. There had been warnings, quiet ones, subtle ones spoken through fear rather than certainty from Anna, whose instincts had rarely failed her. Anna had sensed something shifting, something lurking beneath the surface of Port Charles, moving closer with each passing day. And now the timing of Emma's return felt less like coincidence and more like confirmation. The adjustments Anna feared were not only happening, they were accelerating. For Gio, the emotional conflict was almost overwhelming. He had missed Emma in ways he had been afraid to articulate even to himself. Her absence had left a hollow space in his daily life, a silence between moments that once were easy, bright, uncomplicated. Her messages from afar were never enough. They couldn't replace the warmth of her presence, the way she studied him without even trying, the way she made him feel seen. And now she was coming back, stepping into a world that had grown darker and more unpredictable in her absence. Gio's joy was real, powerful, undeniable, but under it, a new anxiety began to surface. What was Emma walking into, and why now? Of all times, Anna's warnings had started as passing comments, the sort of intuitive concerns that could be brushed aside under normal circumstances. But nothing about Port Charles was normal anymore. The criminal undercurrents were rising again, new alliances were forming in the shadows, and too many secrets were returning to the surface at once. Anna had felt the shift before anyone else, the way the ground beneath the city seemed to tremble without cracking. The way familiar faces suddenly carried unfamiliar tensions. She had spoken of patterns of timing, of the way trouble never arrived alone. And Emma's return lined up with those patterns far too perfectly. Gio sensed it too, though he tried desperately not to dwell on it. His heart clung to excitement, to the thought of Emma walking through the door with that familiar smile, the one that made him believe even briefly that everything chaotic in life could fall back into place. But the closer her return came, the more he felt the subtle but undeniable shift in the air around him. He saw it in the wary looks shared by the people closest to Anna. He felt it in the tension that hovered in conversations about safety, about secrets, about unfinished business. And he could not ignore the truth. Emma's return signaled a new beginning. But beginnings in Port Charles often came with consequences. There was something deeper brewing beneath the surface, something Anna had tried to shield Emma from, something dangerous enough that Emma's prolonged absence might not have been mere coincidence. Now as she prepared to return, that unseen threat appeared to be stirring awake. Emma had never been the type to walk blindly into danger, but even she could not anticipate the emotional and psychological upheaval her arrival would ignite. The town was already in the middle of a delicate transformation, with loyalty shifting, hidden agendas emerging, and long-buried secrets rising like ghosts, demanding to be acknowledged. Emma's presence, whether she intended it or not, would disrupt the fragile balance. Gio could feel it in his chest, that trembling, anxious thrill of knowing that her return meant change. Not the gentle kind, but the kind that breaks open truths people have tried desperately to bury. And in some strange, undeniable way, Gio sensed he was part of this shift. His connection to Emma had always been strong, rooted in sincerity, trust, and unspoken affection. But with her return, that bond could evolve into something powerful enough to draw the attention of forces that shouldn't even know his name. The adjustment, as some quietly called it, was already unfolding. The town's energy had changed. Conversations felt sharper, glances lingered longer. Intuition prickled at the edges of every thought. Emma's return would not simply impact Gio, it would ripple outward, touching the Scorpio Drake Devane and Corinthos circles, and possibly awakening enemies who had been waiting for the right moment to strike. Anna knew this. She had tried to warn them. And now, as the truth began to crystallize, everyone could see that her fears were justified. Gio, trembling with a mix of hope and dread, prepared himself. He wanted nothing more than to run to Emma the second she arrived, to tell her everything he had held inside, to make up for the lost time and protect her from whatever danger might be looming. But even he understood that her return marked the beginning of something bigger than the two of them, a turning point that would test their resilience, their trust, and their place in a town increasingly ruled by secrets and shadows. As Port Charles shifted under the weight of this new reality, one thing became undeniable. Emma's return was not just a joyous reunion. It was the spark that would ignite the next chapter of chaos, truth, and transformation. And Gio, whether he was ready or not, would be standing at the center of it, because Emma was coming home. and nothing about Port Charles would ever be the same again. Emma returned to Port Charles with a heaviness she had never known, carrying the devastating news that Robert was dead, a truth that shattered something quiet and steady inside her. Yet even as she stepped back into the familiar streets of the town that had shaped every corner of her childhood, an unsettling current moved beneath her grief. A whispering reminder that nothing in this place ever happened by accident. She had come home to mourn a grandfather who shaped her sense of right and wrong. But almost immediately she sensed the emotional terrain shifting around her, as if the loss of Robert was only the preface to something much greater, much more treacherous. The first tremor came when Anna, eyes sharp with the kind of fear she rarely allowed the world to see, hinted at a truth Emma could barely process: Robin might still be alive. Those words dug deeper than grief, carving through Emma's shock and forcing her into a space where hope and terror merged into something impossible to untangle. If Robin lived, then everything Emma had believed for years had been manipulated, hidden, or deliberately reshaped by forces she did not yet understand. And if that possibility had been hidden until the moment Robert's death pulled her back to town, then she was no longer just a granddaughter grieving a hero. She was a daughter standing at the edge of a truth someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal. The adjustment unfolding around her was not random. It was orchestrated, a calculated shift in the narrative of her family's life. And Emma could feel herself becoming a central piece in a larger plan she had never agreed to participate in. The timing was too perfect, too emotionally precise, as if someone not only expected her return but needed it, shaping events to ensure she had no choice but to come home. Gio noticed it too. His joy at seeing her again was genuine, intense. A burst of light against the backdrop of everything darkening the town. Yet even he sensed the tension curling around her presence, as though Emma carried with her the spark that would ignite whatever storm had been waiting to break loose. And that storm was tied to Robin, tied to secrets buried long before Emma was old enough to understand the kind of danger her family attracted, tied to enemies who had been waiting for the right moment to re-enter the Scorpio orbit, knowing that Emma's emotional vulnerability made her the perfect pawn. She wanted to believe Robin's survival was a miracle, a blessing, a long-awaited gift from a universe that had already taken too much from her. But Anna's warning made it clear that nothing about this revelation was simple or safe. If Robin lived, then someone had kept her hidden, controlled, or preserved for a purpose Emma could not yet see. And that purpose destabilized everything Emma thought she knew. The adjustment was already underway, weaving through Port Charles like a silent tide, altering relationships, warping alliances, and dragging buried truths into the open. Emma's grief, her hope, her confusion all became pressure points someone out there fully intended to exploit. As she moved through town, hearing condolences for Robert, feeling Gio's concerned gaze, sensing Anna's unspoken urgency, Emma realized she was walking into a labyrinth built long before she arrived. A trap that required her return to trigger its final stage. She felt herself becoming the fulcrum of a dangerous new chapter. One that demanded she confront not just the possibility of Robin's survival, but the sinister intelligence behind the timing of that revelation. Every step she took intensified the sense that the world she once knew had shifted into something volatile and unfamiliar, that Robert's death had been engineered to pull her back. That Robin's possible survival had been withheld until she was in the center of the chaos, that she was now a target, a witness and a catalyst all at once. And as night fell across Port Charles, Emma understood with chilling clarity that she was not just returning to mourn. She was returning to awaken truths powerful enough to reshape the destinies of everyone she loved, and the question that haunted her was no longer whether Robin lived, but why the truth had been revealed now, and what danger waited in the shadows the moment she dared to search for answers. As the chaos surrounding Emma deepened, as secrets twisted into tighter knots, and the haunting possibility of Robin's survival collided with the false news of Robert's death, Gio became the anchor she never expected she would need so desperately. The one steady force standing beside her when every other part of her world seemed to tilt into madness. He sensed the unraveling long before she could give it a name, sensed the tremors in her voice, the sharp shifts in her breathing, the haunted way she looked over her shoulder as though danger had begun following her home. And Gio stepped in without hesitation, positioning himself as the shield between Emma and the spiraling darkness forming at her feet. The adjustment shaping her life, the sudden twist, the eerie timing. The secrets dragging her back into a legacy she wasn't prepared to confront became their shared burden. Something Gio refused to let her face alone. He pulled her out of her spiraling thoughts, steadied her when fear wrapped itself around her ribs, and reminded her that there was still something real, something warm, something alive beneath the weight of everything being forced upon her. Emma had always been strong, but strength meant little when the ground beneath her kept shifting, when the truth she sought threatened to break everything she thought she understood. Yet every time she felt herself slipping, Gio was there, grounding her with a look, a touch, a quiet certainty that she wasn't navigating this madness alone. He became her refuge from the unraveling narrative, the one person who didn't ask her to be brave, who didn't expect her to carry the legacy of the Scorpio name on her own shoulders, who simply stood beside her and absorbed whatever storm rolled her way. And in the intensity of the danger swirling around them, something else began to ignite, a love neither of them had been ready to confront. A slow-burning force that now flared with unmistakable heat as the stakes of Emma's return grew sharper. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, it was the kind of love that bloomed in the quiet places between panic and hope. A love carved from whispered confessions and trembling moments when Emma let Gio see the parts of her she had never planned, shown anyone else. Every time he reached for her, she felt something inside her tighten, not with fear but with recognition. As though the chaos had stripped away everything unnecessary and revealed the truth she had been avoiding she needed. Him not in desperation but in a way that felt inevitable. The adjustments shaping their lives, the threats lurking behind every unanswered question, to the secrets waiting to break the surface, all of it pushed them closer, not apart. Forging a bond that felt unbreakable precisely because it was born in fire. Gio didn't just protect Emma. He amplified her strength, reflected her courage back at her, and made her believe she could survive the nightmare unfolding around her. And Emma, who had returned home expecting only grief and confusion, now found herself caught in a love that grew louder, brighter, and more undeniable with each dangerous step forward. The madness surrounding them could shatter alliances, expose buried sins, and pull Port Charles toward another devastating reckoning. But in the middle of all of it, Emma and Gio discovered something fierce, something alive, something powerful enough to stand against the darkness closing in on them. Their love didn't just grow, it erupted, transforming itself into the very force that would carry Emma through the trials ahead, reminding her that no matter how twisted the path became, she would not walk it alone. Because Gio was no longer just beside her, he was bound to her, woven into every breath of her fight for truth. And together their connection burned bright enough to challenge even the shadows rising around them.